everyone, and welcome to episode 3 of Creative Confidence, where I'm with Katie Teesdale-Ward from Kudosity, and today we are talking about imposter syndrome. Hi Katie, how are you?
Hi, I'm very well. Well, kind of. So I'm kind of all right. Left ear isn't really working, but right ear is absolutely 100%. So if I lean in like this, we'll know.
Fair enough. Okay. So imposter syndrome, it's something that came up yesterday in a panel I was co-chairing in the photography show, and it is something that's always kind of around in the background, but how would you define it?
Well, I think it's something that it's always kind of crept up in conversations over the years, and whether we've put a definition of it before is probably questionable, but it's usually imposter syndrome basically is feeling like you're a bit of a fraud, like you don't really deserve to be there. Either you don't deserve to be, having the interview for the job, or you don't deserve to get the job, or perhaps you don't deserve to have your work shown in a gallery, or there can be a whole different variety of ways in which it kind of comes along and shows itself. But imposter syndrome is that feeling essentially where you go, well, it was, I was in the right place at the right time. It was all a bit of a lucky fluke, or I just knew the right people. Sometimes luck does play a part in life, absolutely, but that's a different case scenario to feeling like you are at the mercy of imposter syndrome. And I think what we wanted to do in the session today was kind of identify what it is, talk about how it manifests itself in kind of the scenarios that we've been in and the situations that we've experienced it. And also talk about, there are some really famous people who have openly admitted having feelings of imposter syndrome, and why we can talk about it, how that helps, and also finally to really talk about how we can overcome it and how to deal with it when it comes along, because it is fluid. There are, like we've talked about, confidence being a muscle. There are days sometimes when you feel at your most confident, and there are other times when you just need to have a little chat with yourself and go through some techniques to help you build up that confidence, help you overcome something like imposter syndrome, because it can be, quite damaging, and we don't want that. We want to be doing everything that we should be doing.
And it's all about, I think there's degrees of imposter syndrome as well, and sometimes it's how you deal with the small things can have an impact on how you deal with the big things.
Absolutely.
I was thinking the other day, it's really important, I think, to have a distinction between the things that you don't want to do and the things that you're actually sort of having negative feelings about yourself, so that you don't have to feel you go for it, if you see what I mean. So, for example, say you're a wedding photographer and you think, oh, I'd love to do destination weddings. It would be great to do destination weddings. And then perhaps a company that runs destination weddings has a vacancy, and you look and you think, oh, that would be fantastic. You look at it and you realize, actually, that means being away every weekend, and the practicalities of that aren't great. And I'm just starting to do this and that, and I don't really want to be away from home that often, so I don't want to do it. Now that's making a decision and deciding that you don't want to do something.
Yes.
But which is very different from thinking, well, I don't think I'd be good enough. I can't do it because of this, and I wouldn't be able to do it because of that. And that is a very negative thing. And I think it's really important to try and be honest sometimes about when you do want to do something. Even maybe you feel you should do something, but actually you don't want to do it because you realize it doesn't fit your circumstances. It's good. It's important to identify those situations.
Yeah, that's a really good point, because there are two different conversations going on in your head potentially. There is one, I can't do that because I'm not good enough, and there's a, I don't actually want to do that. I thought I wanted to do that, but it's exploring that, identifying the circumstances that are around that. They're two very, very different things. And it is important to make sure that you can separate and identify when that's kind of happening. But I think we've all had, experiences. We've talked a lot at length, you know, over maybe a glass of wine, talking where we've been in experiences where we didn't feel like we potentially had the right or the clout or the authority to be able to be in a meeting or a briefing, or with going in for an interview or something like that, where suddenly it feels really, really serious, and you feel like you're the one that's kind of like, well, you know, I'm here, not really sure why I'm here. I want to be here, but I don't quite know how.
Kind of snuck in somehow via the back door.
Exactly. And it's that I snuck in through the back door. It's like, I'm here by luck. They're adding, they're bringing up the numbers. It's all those tiny, tiny little chips away that suddenly start to build up this picture of yourself where you're thinking, actually, I don't deserve to be here and I'm going to shy away. My view isn't important. My contribution to this meeting isn't important. And you see it on a kind of a daily basis. And it's really, really important when those feelings are starting to come along and to build up, that you do hit pause and you go, actually, let's just take a minute here and realize this isn't down to luck. This isn't down to a fluke. This isn't just down to some sort of fraudulent circumstances. I'm being asked along, for example, to this meeting because my opinion is valued by people who have asked me along to this meeting. I've got experience about what this meeting's, what they're discussing within this meeting. Therefore, I have evidence to show that my view is backed up with research, with quantitative information. It's removing any of those elements of doubt to yourself, so that when you are in that situation, you can sit comfortably and confidently with those people, with your peers. It doesn't have to be, you know, it can be all at all different levels, but that you will be able to have your voice heard and to be part of a discussion. And it's really, we see it from a very early age, when you see it from kids, when they don't start to ask girls maths questions or science questions, and you know, it all can kind of build up into those different environments. And I think it's really important to kind of understand that imposter syndrome can happen in any environment. It can be in a corporate finance environment. It can be in an arts environment. It can be when you're out with friends. It can be, you know, it can appear in very, very many disguises. Yeah. But it's important to acknowledge those feelings and kind of work a way around to how you're going to manage them.
It's something I see quite often in SheClicks, actually, as a group, because there's a lot of people, I'll see a post and it says, oh, everyone's got such fantastic work, I don't know if I'm in the right place, and I haven't been brave enough to post any pictures yet. And the thing is, SheClicks is exactly set up to be the place where you can try sharing your images for the first time. And it is a place where we have some fantastic professional photographers, and we have some great enthusiast photographers, and we have some beginners too. And all of us started as beginners, learning how to take control of a camera or a phone or whatever, you know, maybe not even using a camera. Sometimes it's using light sensitive paper or something like that. And it's an important part of the process to take that first step to share your pictures, because SheClicks is somewhere where you can learn and start to feel more confident about sharing your pictures. Now, I understand it's easy to say that, but if you're feeling any kind of doubt about whether your pictures are worthy or whether you are worthy as a photographer, you absolutely are. If you're in SheClicks, you absolutely are worthy of posting your pictures, because that is exactly what the group is about.
Yeah. And I think for you to have been able to create this nurturing environment with the vast numbers of members that you've got is real testimony to you and to the group as well, to kind of the the way in which the group works together. I think it's a really interesting thing when we're posed with that. I'm not sure about posting my pictures. I would really love to, because it's kind of like, I want to put, you know, it's that first kind of step through the door, and you just want somebody to not push you through the door, but kind of say, take your hand and say, yeah, it's absolutely fine. That's the important bit. Now, in terms of for growth, it's then important for once you're in the group to kind of be open to other people's opinions, be open to positive and nurturing critique, because otherwise you will only ever just be stood at the side saying, I wish I could come in. And part of growing and part of that whole growth mindset and overcoming the imposter syndrome is to increase, is to keep going, is to keep trying. Every sort of famous person that has been quoted of having experienced imposter syndrome, you know, people like Maya Angelou, Einstein, they've all sort of said, yes, I felt at some point, I felt in, why was I here? Why have they chosen me to win the book prize? Whatever it's been. It's really important to identify that it didn't stop them from moving forward. Mm-hmm. They saw it, they felt it, you know, probably to a very acute degree, but it never stopped them from keeping going, from keep trying, acknowledging it. So seeing it that, okay, well, I don't feel equipped for this, mm-hmm. but then sort of almost thanking it so that you can see, right, this is my opportunity to kind of mirror back some actual facts that prove that that is not the truth.
Yeah.
And to keep trying, to keep pushing is part of the growth that we'll see within SheClicks.
I'd be really interested to know when Einstein felt like he was winging it.
Yeah.
Every chance we won't know for many years yet, when he's found to be actually not accurate on something. But it's incredible if someone like that can feel like, you know, have imposter syndrome and have those feelings. And so many millions of people know his name and understand, well, maybe not understand, but know what he did.
Yeah, exactly. And it is that point of, it's the growth, it's the keep going, it's the acknowledge it, but don't be at the mercy of it, because it can feel crippling. It can feel like you can't apply for that job, or you can't apply, or you can't contact somebody from Canon or whoever and say, I'm really interested in being one of your ambassadors. This is my work. This is, you know, there are so many circumstances now where you can be visible and you can be directly in contact with so many creative people, so many creative opportunities. And as we're still at the whole mercy of the coronavirus, there is a much needed sense of connection that we have to have as a community. And I think by recognizing when this kind of imposter syndrome can take hold, it can stop you from engaging with people that you really want to have a conversation with. And as creatives and as content creators, we should definitely be taking every opportunity that's available and that's open to us, and not letting something like an imposter syndrome sit with us for too long.
Yeah. Now, you've touched on meetings, and obviously physical meetings are less common now, and we're having a lot of Zoom meetings, and I think actually in some respects they can help magnify imposter syndrome, because suddenly you're dealing with technology and there's that whole, it's difficult to speak sometimes because you can't always tell whether you're speaking over somebody or they don't know that they're speaking over you. So it can be hard to be heard. And if you're experiencing some imposter syndrome, I think, as I say, it magnifies it. But I think one thing that I've noticed that seems to help with in things like Zoom meetings is when you join, to say hello and say who you are, because once you've said something, it's far easier to chirp up again. If you just sneak in the meeting, just join and sit in the background, becomes harder and harder and harder to actually contribute something. And, you know, you were invited for a reason. So it would be really, you know, people do want to hear from you. So I would say, you know, it doesn't have to be a big, long introduction, but if you just say who you are and where you are or something like that, I think it's really good to just make that start.
Yes. And I think it's a really important point about the whole technology is whilst we feel we've come so far since March, I think it was March.
Last year or something.
Last year, whatever it was, that it all started and Zoom became, you know, like a commonplace. There is still, you know, it doesn't necessarily mean that we're completely au fait with it. So at the moment, I know that I'm looking at you on my screen when I should be looking up at the green dot on my
if you would. And I can see my eyes darting, you know.
You know, and suddenly when you start to think about all the things that you perhaps should know, you know, I checked to make sure there was no bra on the radiators behind me and all that kind of stuff. But we assume that everybody feels the same level of comfort that we do when we're going into kind of a Zoom call or an online meeting. And to break the ice just by one, it makes sure that your microphone's working.
Yes.
And that people can have heard that you are there and know your name, know your title. And when you have multiple people within a Zoom meeting, often, as with physical meetings, I've seen, and it is mainly women, I will admit, that will just be in the meeting and they'll kind of be taking all the notes. And they'll be like, yeah, okay. Because, and it's like, no, stop with the note taking. Put maybe some salient facts. Even say, I'd be much more comfortable. I'm much more comfortable in this situation if I actually record the meeting so that I can come back and revisit some of the key points that we talked about. I think if you vocalize those thoughts straight away, you are taking off all of this massive pressure that you're feeling, and it could be that somebody else feels exactly the same way. Mm-hmm. Your voice, your presence within a meeting is requested for a purpose, and what you have to contribute is important.
So we kind of discussed what it is, how it feels, but are there any other things you think that people can do to start to overcome it?
I think it's worth sort of almost having, like, I carry with me a notebook pretty much wherever I go. And it's worth jotting down the times when you start to feel it. So it could be that there are certain conditions which you're in when you start to suddenly think, oh, actually, I recognize this as I'm making all the sort of glib jokes that are really unnecessary, or I'm apologizing for being here. I'm apologizing for contributing to this. It's worth noting what your triggers are, because what my triggers are will be different to yours, which will be different to somebody else's. Mm-hmm. It's worth recognizing those triggers. And it's also worth noting from the smallest thing to the biggest thing, the areas of success that you have. So that what you want to do is you want to be able to, on those days where you're feeling a bit wobbly or you're feeling not your confident best, that you can go to your sort of, you know, lookbook and just go, actually, I've got evidence that when I did that, I was successful here and it proved to this. You know, it is those kind of moments where you need to have physical written down evidence of your success and not be afraid. You know, we often, again, apologize for our successes. Stop that, because if you don't start to document it, all you'll be able to say is, oh, I think I did that, and I think that was successful. Take away the doubt, remove that from it, and start to put together your book where you can just go in and say, actually, I did that, it worked, I was right to question that, I was right to pitch that, this is what I would do differently, but make sure that you have some level of evidence. That's really, really important.
I think that's a really, really good point. And actually thinking about it, say if you did a presentation to 10 people and 9 people came up or emailed you later and said, that was really interesting, I really enjoyed that presentation, I'm going to take this away from it. Or they just said, great presentation, really enjoyed it. And then one person emails you and said, oh, well, I found that a bit boring. Or maybe they don't come to you, or they come to you and say, I found it a bit boring, or I couldn't really understand this, so I don't really get it, I'm not that interested. I think the natural inclination is to kind of worry about that one person. But actually, if you've written down, made a note of the fact that 9 other people came to you and said that they really enjoyed it, or they got something from your presentation, or whatever it was you're doing, it helps to kind of quantify it. But you can see you've got 9 lines which are positive things, and only one person didn't get it. And maybe they were in a bad mood. Maybe they just had a massive argument with their partner or something. Who knows? Got out the wrong side of the bed. I think it helps you get a sense of scale, which is really, really important.
I think the scale thing is important. And it is, again, that whole kind of, we all want to grow. We all want to be in that growth mindset. We don't want to be the person that looks at the 9 pieces of positive feedback and then just focuses on that one email that just sits there in big, bold type saying, well, I didn't really enjoy that. There are times when you need to be able to go, okay, this is the proof positive of what worked and what didn't. There is a difference between being able to grow and to look at that piece, that one email, for example, and say, okay, I can read that and I can take that on board, and maybe, yes, they have got a point about that bit. Mm-hmm. I understand that, I'll process that, and it's done within scale. It's not done within kind of, oh my gosh, this one person didn't get it, and I'll never be able to present this piece of information ever again because that person definitely didn't get it, so therefore all the other 9 people were just being nice.
Yeah, they all thought I was an idiot, therefore I am an idiot.
Exactly. And it always comes back to those stories, that narrative that you tell yourself, and being in the right place and having the right level of evidence and feedback and constructive, being within a constructive group where you can ask for feedback, and you know that will be a mix, and you can take those points as points of growth, but not be crucified by it and not let it take you all the way back.
Yeah. And this is something we can look at in all different aspects of life, I think. It could be a big business meeting, and that will be a more, sort of pressurized situation, but it might be something quite small, when something doesn't go right, but it's not your fault. It's a technical hitch that nobody could have predicted. Maybe the internet crashed or something like that. Don't apologize for it because it's not your fault. But there's an automatic response feeling, oh, I should have been able to do something. Well, what could you do? Completely rewire your village or something. You won't do anything, but all it does is create this kind of sense that you are responsible for sorting out every problem, and you're not good enough because you can't.
Yeah, that is a very interesting point, and especially if you lean more towards kind of being a perfectionist or being someone that cannot delegate. You beware of the kind of standards that you're setting, because you are guaranteed to fail. You are guaranteed that it will not be as perfect as in your head you wanted it to be, or all the other people in the team didn't perform up to your standards because A, they didn't know what your standards were, and B, they were just doing their best. Mm-hmm. So it's then that can seep into, well, obviously, I'm not the right person to lead this team. I'm not the right person to manage this project. I'm not the right person for this job, for this company, for this role. What was I ever thinking? And it's just suddenly your head explodes with all these other things that you feel that you're not good enough to do, and you kind of heart that, it's very destructive. And it's important to always to kind of be checking yourself when you're going into, if you're going into a meeting, understand you've been asked for the meeting, you've been asked to join the meeting, your opinion is important, otherwise you wouldn't be asked. Mm-hmm. You're being asked probably based on some of the research, or you've not been plucked from the ether to just appear. And try and sort of dial yourself down before going into that meeting, because otherwise you will start by apologizing for even being there, and people will be questioning kind of why you are there.
Yeah.
And make no mistakes, that if you are in a group meeting, probably if there's a group of 6 of you, 5 other of you will be feeling pretty much the same as well. So don't ever think that everybody is in a meeting going, well, I know everything, and that's, you know, that's my deal.
Although I have been in in meetings where a few people did seem to think they know everything and didn't mind telling me about it.
Yes, we've had those too.
Very different thing. Very different.
That's for a different creative company.
So I'm a big advocate of networking, and I know you are, and of creating support groups, and that could be a big one like SheClicks, or it could be a more intimate group, you know, 2 or 3 friends that you can communicate with on a regular basis. And say, you know, you're just about to go in to a big meeting, or you're just about to show your pictures to someone, or maybe you've got your RPS panel just about to be viewed. You can message them and say, I'm going in, and they'll come back and say, it's going to be great, or whatever, you know, and they just give you that little pep, you know, that makes you realize, yeah, it's okay, we've got your back, it's okay, we've looked at your stuff, you're going to do really well.
And also, just before, if you know what time your meeting is, obviously put a reminder in your phone that flashes up with a really positive message from yourself to yourself that just says, you've got this, you've got, you know, this is, you're great, check that your skirt's not in your pants, all these kind of stuff.
Yes.
You know, that puts you in a really positive frame of mind before you talk to the gallery owner, before you talk to the potential employer, before you pitch for more new business. There is a responsibility from yourself to really kind of manage your mindset, manage where you are, also introduce a group that's going to support, and then just go, then just, you know, take the leap, because you're capable. You are you are so worth every kind of positive experience that you can put yourself in the frame for, and just do it.
Yes. And I actually, you know, you reminded me of something that happened a few years ago, and it was at the photography show. I was asked to talk I can't remember what it was, I think it was the beginner's masterclass it was called then, and I said, oh yeah, sure, okay, I'll do that piece. I think I was explaining camera choice or something like that. Yeah, sure, I don't mind. How many people? And they said, oh, it's about 25. I said, oh, okay. And I got to the room. Obviously I'd prepared, you know, I was asked a few months before, and when on the day I got to the room and I opened the door and I thought, that's a lot of chairs. And there was a lot more than 25. And I went to the guy who was sort of setting up all the mics and stuff, and I said, how many people are supposed to be coming to this? And he said, 350. I was like, oh, okay. And I remember thinking to myself, actually, you know what? I've prepared this and I know what my opening is. And I remember just running through it in my head, saying, so as long as I can get the first few words out, I know I'm running. And then I've got my slides, and each slide will remind me what I'm supposed to talk about. And as long as I can get those first few words out, and that's hello, I am, then I'll be okay. And I kind of like, okay. And I did it, you know, and it was fine, and I enjoyed it, and people asked questions. But it was that I didn't actually have a message on my phone, but I did actually stop myself and actually go through the process of remembering I have prepared for this. And the only thing that's changed is the number of people. I'm not going to do it in any different way. You know, it's, I'm going to give the, if there's only been 5 people, I would have given the same presentation. So nothing changed. So it was just, yes, remembering those little marker points to stop and think and remind yourself.
Yeah. And it can, you know, 25 versus 350 is a big leap.
It's quite a leap.
But once you're there, like you say, everything would have been, you would have done exactly the same regardless 5 or 350.
Yeah.
But you had evidence and you had support to show that you weren't just going to wing it. This isn't a case of just going to go up there and have a bit of a chat. You had the structure which gave you the confidence to know that whether it's 5, 350, you could deliver that presentation with confidence, that the people who asked you to give that presentation knew that you would deliver regardless of the number. That's probably why they didn't tell you. So that should be fine. Get her in Wembley, she'll be all right.
Yeah. Hello, Wembley.
But it is, you know, whether you're in the car just about to see someone for the first time, if you're doing a wedding shoot or whatever, and you're about to meet the bride and groom, and this is the first, you know, the first meeting, you can have all those feelings of, oh, crikey, you know, they've seen the portfolio online and maybe they've just bought into that, and maybe they won't like me, and maybe I'm not good enough to do this, and maybe they want something different. Whew.
Yeah.
Sit in the car, turn the engine off, remind yourself why you're there and that they are human.
Rehearse your first words, even in that situation. So you don't hold your hand out and say, this is my first wedding.
Yeah. Exactly. Because have you ever known of a photographer who's rocked up to an event or a gig and said, this is my first time? I don't think I've ever heard anybody admit that. But at some point, there will have been somebody, you know, you are my first client, or you are my first time that I have presented this. You are the first time that I have actually delivered the whole of my portfolio to someone. And nobody's opening gambit has ever been that, I don't think.
No, I don't think at all. And other times I think that, you know, when I first went freelance and somebody asked me how much something cost.
Yeah.
And I just told them, and they just wrote it down. And I was like, oh, that was a lot easier than I was expecting. You know,
yes, exactly. That's a very interesting one. The whole pitching for business and talking about rates and how to deliver that is, you know, I think that's something that we could come on to another time. Just because it all comes down to having confidence in your business. Obviously, there is a big part of it that is marketing and, you know, understanding where you are within those businesses, but it is about acknowledging the evidence-based, acknowledging that you can go in and pitch for the business, and that there is no need for this imposter syndrome to really dictate how you deliver your work or your personal life.
Yeah. Now, we spoke about support groups and friends who can really help you, and obviously you offer them support as well, and that bounces back to you because you kind of learn from when they're experiencing negative issues, and you think, oh, that seems a bit silly to me, but clearly they must think when I'm having these imposter syndrome moments, that is also silly to them. So therefore, you know, we can iron this out between us. So you can pick who's going to support you, but I think you also need to look out for you can spot the people that you should ignore. I'm not going to listen to you because you, my friend, are an idiot.
You, my friend, shall not be entertained in my head.
Exactly.
No.
I genuinely think that's important, and it's not easy sometimes to sort of, I'm going to be very careful what I say. Maybe there is someone who you work with and you just think, actually, you don't know what you're talking about in this particular subject. So I'm going to let you say your piece, but I'm really not going to worry about it.
Exactly. I think there's a difference between surrounding yourself with sycophants. So if somebody is going to say, oh yes, great, love it, love it, love it, love it, love it, love it all the time, to having a balance of, you know, balance within, and I certainly think within kind of this creative industry, it's important that you can, and I think that's where SheClicks has really excelled, is that there is, you can see that there are different tiers of kind of photographers, but I've never seen or experienced people saying, well, I'm a better photographer than you. It's just, well, I'm a more experienced photographer than you, or I've done, you know, I've gone into this side of photography and moved over from that. But no, I don't think anybody's ever said, oh, I'm a better photographer than you. It does happen in other groups. But it is important to have a balance of people that are going to encourage you, but are also that you can take constructive critique from in a balanced way, that you're not going to turn around and just crumple, that you're actually going to say, actually, yes, that does make sense, and I could try that next time. Having confidence in your ability and having confidence to be able to move into that whole stretch area is important. But I think you've certainly sort of struck the right balance in SheClicks. And that's where I've seen people post photographs of various subjects. People are confident enough to ask for advice. How could I improve? What would you have done differently? Have I, you know, are there any other techniques that I could have used? To have that confidence to be able to ask for advice and also go, you know, this is where I am now, but actually I want to improve, is really important.
That's a good point. And I just sort of a little addendum to that. If you post saying, could I have a little constructive criticism on this? Mm. If nobody replies, it doesn't mean that they hated your photograph. It could mean that there was, you know, your post was just at a tricky time when, you know, maybe there was a big news announcement, or it was a particularly sunny day, or it was late at night, or lots of people posted, which is more common. Lots of people posted at that time, and somehow your post got skipped. But so don't be afraid to ask again, and don't assume that everybody hated your photographs.
Yes,
it could be a sort of a circumstance. You know, having worked in publishing,
oh yes,
know that sometimes you produce the best mag you could ever have imagined producing with the most beautiful cover, but for whatever reason, every other magazine has got the same headline or something like that, and it just doesn't sell.
Or it just, you know, the headline, it just doesn't sell. It just bombs.
It was sunny. Nobody wanted a magazine because it was sunny.
Yeah. And we used to see it, you know, sort of August, all that, you know, issues used to, but it would be the most beautiful front cover, or would have a real headline, photographer interview, and all of that kind of stuff. And you would just be like, what? Or you've poured over a bunch, you know, a whole bunch of images and portfolios, and you've poured your heart and soul into it, and suddenly it's kind of out in the ether. That's where understanding that actually that's your work, and you don't need, the value doesn't need to come from other people. But if you want to have some feedback, then test the other doors, rephrase the question, other than, do you like it, yes or no? Yeah. There are different ways to work out how to pitch that. But I think to bring this to a conclusion, I think what I've found is with the imposter syndrome is that it will, in the further creative confidence episodes that we do, I think there will be an element of where we can talk about imposter syndrome again. But I think to kind of bring it to a conclusion, to say that it's really important to identify when you are feeling those moments of where it's actually seeping in, and identify those, kind of note those, because there might be a common theme with it. It might be that you feel imposter syndrome more when you're meeting people rather than when you're dealing with work or when you're presenting.
Yes, that's a very good point.
Kind of identifies some potential training needs that you have there, and once they're identified and dealt with, you can feel, you know, it brings you back up again. So it's important to kind of log those, as boring as it sounds, kind of log those, note those. If you want to really experience some a positive growth mindset and a positive keeping going and keep moving forward, it's important to identify when those happen. And then identify kind of the evidence, all of the evidence that you have within your life about where you've overcome, or where your skill set is, or what you are good at, and when those happened and how it happened, because that will be your, when I'm feeling crappy, everything, you know, everything I'm touching goes wrong today, every email that you get is just a rejection, or every phone call is just bizarre, then you can just go, do you know what, I'm going to make a cup of tea and I'm going to look at all the bits that I'm good at, because your head will just switch into a completely different mindset.
Good advice, I think. And just before we finish, you know, I keep looking down, that's because I'm keeping an eye on the Facebook comments, and a good friend of ours, we're keeping everything anonymous when people are writing comments, so I'm not going to say their name, but a good friend of ours had said above her desk she has got a note which says, you can't be brave if you're not a little scared. And I think that's a really nice way of putting things. You know, we do admire people who are brave. It doesn't mean you have to leap off a cliff, but just pushing yourself a little bit sometimes can be really beneficial.
Yes, and it proves to yourself that you can take your limit a little bit further. And that doesn't necessarily mean, like you say, jumping off a cliff. It could be ringing somebody up rather than sending an email. And those tiny little improvements, you know, progress over perfection, it all adds up. It all makes every daily little chip will add to a really, really positive and creative mindset, which is really important. You know, you've got a whole world of incredible photographers on SheClicks, and we just want that to keep on going and to keep on growing.
Fantastic. Well, Katie, as ever, it's been really fantastic talking with you, and I hope that people have enjoyed listening and will get some benefit. I'm sure many will, because there's lots of pearls of wisdom come from you.
It's been lovely. I've really enjoyed it once again, and thank you ever so much, Angela. I do appreciate it.
I hope your cold gets better very soon.
So do I. I'm so pleased I didn't snot everywhere. So pleased.
Bye.
Take care.